At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers, the ministry, 3IE and its partners, and also all the audience, esteemed audience who are here. Across the world, like evidence-based policy and program management is becoming more and more important, and there is a lot of emphasis on impact investments and so forth. And while I was at Niti Aayog, what I realized is Ministry of Rural Development is at the forefront of evidence generation and using it. And therefore, today's proceedings are not only important for rural development, but also I think it will provide a lot of insights for many other ministries and other initiatives too. So to that extent, I think it's very, very important today's proceedings. Our goal for today is to unpack what institutionalizing evidence really means in practice, beyond generating studies, and explore how findings resonate with diverse stakeholders. And here we have truly extraordinarily diverse panel members representing different dimensions of program and policy making. We'll go through around 5 quick rounds of questions. It's going to be challenging, but I hope, because it's so rich and so diverse, I think it's important to go through it. What I would request the panel members is to watch the time. We just have around 40-45 minutes to go through. And before we start the panel discussion, it's my privilege to introduce the panel. First, it's a privilege to introduce Ms. Smriti Sharan, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Rural Development. She has been leading a number of flagship rural development programs. She has more than 15 years of policy and programming implementation, and also very keen on knowledge generation and publications. Ms. Sachi Balla is Deputy Director, Gender Equality Gates Foundation, working at the intersection of health, nutrition, and gender equality, and has contributed to gender, rural livelihood, and pandemic recovery-related publications. Mr. Shamik Das, Senior Specialist, World Bank, with over 20 years experience in rural development programs across Asia and Africa, including much acclaimed project formulations in Africa and Central Asia, including Nigeria for Women Project and Uzbekistan Rural Enterprises Program. Dr. Anjani Kochar, you have already heard her. She is Senior Fellow at 3IE, and before joining 3IE, she led the India program at Stanford Center on Global Poverty and Development for more than 20 years. Each of them are so extraordinary, I can take the whole day introducing them, so I'll stop here. With this, I think just as a warming up, I would like everyone to give some high-level reflections of your perspectives, what stands out from the findings so far that you have heard. And we will go through Dr. Kochar. She will provide the evidence-based background. Then we will get policy insights from Mrs. Sharan, and then cross-cutting perspectives from Mrs. Bala, and take it to global by Mr. Das. So with this, I request Dr. Kochar to give high-level reflections. You have already done, but thanks.
So I already gave you high-level reflections. So I'm going to give you even higher-level reflections now. Just the central message that this process of transforming the country is obviously a difficult one. It's one that we've all been engaged in for a long time. I'm going to leave it to everybody else in the panel to talk about that, because they are the implementers. I am here on the research side. And what I try to emphasize is, and I'll talk about it later on, so I won't go in much detail, it also requires a different research thinking, and perhaps most importantly, It requires a collaboration between researchers and implementers. You cannot do this kind of research without strong institutional knowledge, and for that we rely on implementers, we rely on their support. So I think there's this requirement for new ways of going forward and for new research and for strengthened partnerships in a very effective way.
So the high-level reflection that comes to us is we've been in a churn for quite a while, discussing with the states of what has worked, what has not worked, and also looking at what Dr. Kocher just presented. What I take home is that we've built a very solid base, a strong social fabric that is almost building the nation. However, what worked 10 years back may need large-scale tweaking or even abandoning what has not worked. So, for example, we took pride that we are working with the women. But Dr. Kocher's research now shows that we've got to make sure that we include younger participants and make it equally flexible to keep it vibrant. What I also understand is that targeted approach against the backdrop of limited resource envelope in the nation can yield exponential results. So, going forward too, while we could have a universal approach, a targeted approach has worked and can be upscaled. Another thing that we've been dwelling, also based on what Dr. Kocher has talked to us before, the role of federations and especially model cluster level federation, how we created it and how we're going to go forward needs a big think. And I think we'll have to rejig the whole understanding of what CLF was made for and to take it to the next level.
Thank you, Dr. Bonu, and thank you. I think, Dr. Kocher, this was such a great start to the day to get this high-level overview of what are we learning, but also positioning it in the context of, in a sense, how India is changing. And I want to just actually focus my reflections on some of that. It's really important to not just track that change, but also to track the processes or the how things are changing and showing us the types of outcomes that we are seeing. I thought that one of the really impressive aspects of DAY-NRLM is that in its design, it allows for a lot of iteration. And that's what I think, even what Dr. Kocher said, likening the institutional setups and the way that the systems are designed to a school. I thought that was such a great analogy because I think it's really important to ensure that we have strong institutions, have strong structures, processes, but the design itself does not stop you from testing new things and the iterations that are required to ensure that you're in a sense future-proof. And we spoke about this a lot yesterday. How do we make sure that these community institutions actually become vibrant, dynamic institutions that are able to actually drive both economic empowerment as well as social empowerment? And I think that speaks to the connect on markets as well as social networks and the social fabric. And I feel like that's the piece that we must dig deeper into. How do we actually take the learnings from this very large scale study that's been conducted? And Dr. Bonu, as you said, it's not easy to study government programs at such depth and repeatedly, and then to take those learnings on into the design aspects as the program evolves. But I think this NRLM actually provides us an example which is to the contrary, that there has been a consistent effort to understand the mechanisms that work and integrate them and change design, be iterative. I feel like the word that stands out for me when I think about NRLM is that it is an iterative program, and maybe I'll pause at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Das.
Thank you for having me. I think I've been in this process for a long time, over 2 decades as it stands out to be. Just a couple of things that comes to my mind which I need to put it on. We don't see evidence and evaluation studies as a knowledge product. So we need to look at it from the perspective how it will influence design, it will influence what needs to be financed and the implementation on ground. I think more and more the political economy around evidence is changing, and that is a good sign basically, because when you bring evidence to the forefront, whether it's positive or negative, it has political economy in which it has to be put in. I think the presentation you did in terms of what we did as a design for an RETP based on the institutional platform we created establishes the fact that certain interventions should lead to the impacts that will definitely be going towards policy, going towards operational changes, and also going towards ecosystem impacts, where we see various institutions come together in terms of provide that evidence to be taken seriously. I think that's a very important aspect we need to look at, how we are creating an ecosystem around evidence being used for policy making or influencing physical space for new programs. Right? Today, when we are thinking of the new program for RPRP, Rural Prosperity and Resilience, this information backup that has come out as evidence would work to convince Department of Finance or Ministry of Finance in creating physical space for what you need to do. So I think that political economy of evidence, which I am kind of laboring on, is a very important aspect of how do we communicate this information to our decision makers, policy makers, and people who design programs, right? So I think that's where we need to look at it, and how do we make it more palatable in our communication of this information, because the way it is communicated technically, as I think Anil put it, it's very technical, but how do you make it communicated to the wider audience who do these major decisions at the cusp at what India is today and where these decisions have to be taken will be very important going forward. I think that is the next step. How do you take this forward from MORD side to convert that evidence that is coming out of it into the next program and more actionable financing coming into this.
थैंक यू सो मच। जो दीदियाँ अलग अलग कोने से आए हैं, डिंडोरी, मध्य प्रदेश और दूसरी जगह से, आपका काम को बहुत सराहना किया है और आप लोगों के साथ जो संवाद और आपका बात सुन के जो सीखा है उसके बलबूते पे प्रोग्राम आगे निकला है। और इसके अलावा ये जो 10-15 साल से आपने मेहनत करके जो काम किया है उससे जो गहरा समझ बना है उसे भविष्य के लिए बहुत और अच्छा प्रोग्राम्स निकालेंगे, इसके बारे में बात चला है। और continuing with this, I would like to thank you all for the reflections, and now let's explore how these findings connect with your own work in different perspectives. What does it actually mean to whether they confirm, challenge, or extend what you see in your practice? Again, we start with Dr. Kocher.
It's a hard question to answer, just because the findings are my work. The research is my work and is what I do. But I will rephrase that, if I may, and put it in the context of research more generally, and say how do these findings contribute to the existing research. So one of the things I hope that you will take away from this is that any research study should be interpreted within the context of research study, meaning these policy studies, impact evaluations that are done, should be interpreted within the context of the program that they study. Okay, so you can get, and I'm going to make a comparison to the programs for the ultra poor. And this is also a study that has been, it's a long-term study. And the finding of the result is there are significant impacts from that research. And those impacts come from the migration of households. Now, to me, that is not at all surprising, because that program is an individually targeted program. It does not impact markets. It's very narrowly targeted. And so if you give someone the ability to do well, but without changing rural markets, the only way they can realize that return is from migration. So that's how you see that program. That doesn't mean that other programs will follow in the same way. The research has to be embedded in the program. And that is, I think, one thing that I hope you will take away from this, and use in the interpretation of results from other studies.
धन्यवाद सर। मैंने जो आपका सवाल समझा वो आई विल जस्ट लाइक टू रीफ्रेज इट सो दैट आई एम ऑन पॉइंट। आपने ये पूछा कि ये जो एविडेंस है ये हमारे जो हम मौजूदा जो काम कर रहे हैं उससे वो कैसे कनेक्ट करता है, तो मैं आपको उसके बारे में कुछ बताती हूँ। डॉक्टर कोचर ने पहली स्लाइड में बोला कि जो हमारा इकोसिस्टम अभी भी है स्वयं सहायता समूह का, वो कुछ 3-4 चीज़ों से थोड़ा डिसएडवांटेज्ड है, लिमिटेड है अपनी ग्रोथ में। वो है दीदियों की कम लेवल ऑफ शिक्षा। दूसरा है विलेज साइज स्मॉल है, उनका मार्केट भी स्मॉल है, और जो एग्जिस्टिंग मार्केट है वो बहुत वीक है। और ये हमें कई कई जगह से यही बातें सुनने में आ रही थी। इसलिए दिसंबर में जब हमें बताया गया कि बजट अनाउंसमेंट के लिए हमें अपने इनपुट्स देने चाहिए, तो हम सब बैठे और हमने कुछ चीज़ों को चुन के उसमें से निकाला। और उसमें सबसे पहला था कि हमने लाइवलीहुड की एक जो माइंडसेट है, जो धारणा है, वो हमने अच्छे से दीदियों के मन में निहित कर दी हैं, बैठा दी हैं। सबको पता है कि 2 से 3 जब तक जीविका के साधन नहीं होंगे, दीदी का घर तरक्की नहीं करेगा, और ये बैठ चुका है लोगों के मन में। लेकिन इसके आगे क्या? तो ये पहला सवाल था। दूसरा था, दीदी हर जगह जब हम जाते हैं वो बात करते हैं कि मैंने प्रोडक्ट तो बना लिया, मैं बेचूं कहाँ, मार्केट कहाँ है? मुझे कोई बताता नहीं है कि बगल के गांव में मेरे प्रोडक्ट के डिमांड है। तीसरा था कि ये जो हर महीने हमें लोन अदायगी करनी होती है, कभी कभी जब हम बड़ा उद्यम लगाते हैं हम हर महीने लोन अदायगी नहीं कर पाते। सही है ना दीदी? क्योंकि एक फ्रूशन लैग होता है जब आप पैसे को इन्वेस्ट करते हो और जब वो फलने लगता है। उस समय में दीदियों की ये क्षमता नहीं होती है कि वो पैसा रीपे कर सके। तो ये प्लेन वनीला लोन और बैंक लिंकेज से अब आगे काम नहीं चलेगा, हमें इसके आगे बढ़ना है। तो ब्लेंडेड फाइनेंस, नए तरीके के लोन की सुविधा उपलब्ध कराने की आवश्यकता थी। और चौथा ये था कि अगर समूह में ही शक्ति है और सब दीदियां लार्ज स्केल पे ये चीजें मांग रही हैं, ब्रांडिंग है, पैकेजिंग है, मार्केटिंग है, नई चीजों को पढ़ने और समझने के लिए कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग की अगर आवश्यकता है, तो क्या हम सब ये सब चीजें एक जगह मुहैया करा सकते हैं? तो हमने सोचा कि रूरल एंटरप्रेन्योरियल हब्स होने चाहिए, जहाँ पे एक कन्वेयर बेल्ट सी स्थिति हो, जहाँ पे अगर किसी दीदी को ट्रेनिंग चाहिए तो वो ट्रेनिंग ले सकती है, लोन के बारे में जानना चाहती है तो लोन ले सकती है, लोन मिल भी सकता है, उसको मवेशी का इंश्योरेंस कराना है तो वो भी मिल सकता है, और अगर उसको अपने प्रोडक्ट के लिए बाहर मार्केट ढूंढना है तो वो भी मिल सकता है। तो हमने जब ड्राइंग बोर्ड पे गए तो हमने इन्हीं 4 चीज़ों को सोचा और हमने बोला कि अब हम उद्यमिता की ओर चलेंगे। जीविका बना लिया, सबको पता है बकरी रखनी है, जैविक खेती करनी है, थोड़ा सेव करना है, बैंक में पैसा डालना है, ये सब दीदी समझती है। लेकिन अब आगे क्या? ऐसे तो नहीं बैठ सकते। तो हमने कहा उद्यमिता माइंडसेट अगर होगा, हमको बड़े उद्यम करने हैं। वर्ल्ड बैंक ने हमें बताया हायर ऑर्डर एंटरप्राइज। हायर ऑर्डर एंटरप्राइज का मतलब है कि ना केवल आप काम करें, आपके परिवार के लोग काम करें, कम से कम 2-4 लोगों को नौकरी देने में तो आप सक्षम हो, तभी तो गांव बढ़ेगा। तो हमने उसके बारे में सोचा। रूरल एंटरप्रेन्योरियल हब्स is like a very big ask which we are hoping to build it into our next NRLM 2.0. Innovative finance, नए तरीके के फाइनेंस बहुत आवश्यक है, जिसमें ब्लेंडेड फाइनेंस है, इक्विटी फंड है, और भी जो चीज़ें हैं, मुझे ज़्यादा इनके बारे में फ़िलहाल जानकारी नहीं है, बट वी अंडरस्टैंड कि ये एक डेफिशिएंसी है जिसको कि हमें पूरा करना है। और इन सब से हम ये भी जानना चाहते हैं या लोगों को समझाना चाहते हैं कि उसके बाद माइग्रेशन जिसको हम पलायन कहते हैं, पर मुझे पलायन थोड़ा नेगेटिव लगता है, क्योंकि पलायन मीन्स कि आप किसी दुविधा को देख करके या कठिन स्थिति को देख करके भाग रहे हैं। पर माइग्रेशन तब ऐसा होना चाहिए कि वो आपके लिए एक ऑप्शन हो, आपको फोर्स होकर के पलायन नहीं करना कि कहीं और जीविका के साधन ढूंढना। तो डॉक्टर कोचर के और 3I के इस रिसर्च से जो हम सोच रहे थे वो पूरा वैलिडेट होता है, पूरा तालमेल में बैठता है, और हम अपने NRLM 2.0 में ये सारी फाइंडिंग्स को पूरी तरीके से, पूरी निष्ठा से उतारने की कोशिश करेंगे। ठीक बोला ना दीदी?
Very difficult to go after Smriti ma'am, who's captured, how the learnings translate into new program design, and literally into the lives of women across the country. Maybe I'll try to reflect on, as a philanthropic organization, how are we taking the learnings and the insights, and what does that mean in terms of the work that we do going forward. So first, I think, as Smriti ma'am also said, that in many ways the insights have reinforced what we have thought about. One, that just having thinking about credit is not necessarily going to change women's lives and household incomes drastically beyond a point. There is, of course, a need for credit, and as we even think about entrepreneurial ventures, credit is a very important aspect. But if it's not connected to markets, and I would actually say, if there's not even guidance around where to build your entrepreneurial ventures, what are those high productivity sectors, what are those high growth sectors, where are you actually going to be filling in where there's a gap in the supply, or there's high demand, then it's going to be difficult to actually move towards income generation and sustainable, resilient income generation. So I think the findings very clearly highlight that for us. And it also highlights the importance of those institutions, community institutions, but also government institutions and market institutions. And I think the model CLFs actually provide us a really fundamental base, which even going forward, I think we need to take these learnings to say, how do you strengthen the aggregation mechanisms? How do you connect them better with markets? And how do you, as the government has many times reiterated, we need an all of government, all of society approach. I'd say an all of markets approach also to this. So I think the value that a philanthropic organization like the Gates Foundation can bring in is actually test and learn. So we don't have to take big, bold bets at scale. What we can support is in working with government, working with partners like at the World Bank, but also critically working with civil society organizations and private sector, actually devise new interventions, pilot them out, ensure that we have strong learnings coming from there that can then feed back into programs and policy design at a larger scale. So I'd say that's the one big step that we would like to take as the Gates Foundation, working closely with government. Second, I do think that as Dr. Kochar also mentioned, poverty eradication and income generation are two vastly different goals. And again, going back into how do we think about the structural transformation that India is in the midst of and India needs to work towards, and ensure that program designs are actually in line with that. I would go as far to say it's not ever going to be one ministry or one department's job. So really thinking about convergence, thinking about what are the mechanisms through which you are able to bring that various support systems, whether they are social safety net programs or there are larger sort of, say, skill building type of goals, and bring them down to the community level. And again, I think the CLFs are really that that point at which all of this converges. And I'd like to just, and maybe Dr. Kochar will speak to this later, but we recognizing that through NRLM we have more than 1 million frontline workers. We have many cadres that can actually reach the last mile, can actually using the strength of their peer networks and their social connections actually ensure that really that there is a you are able to actually widen your social network, maybe not directly, but through partners, through peers, and also through digital. So I'd say that's the third piece. So the entire sort of convergence aspect would be second, and the third would be really leaning into digital and AI solutions, and again testing and learning what works to drive livelihoods and income generation, while not forgetting about the social empowerment aspects that are also critical and a core part of NRLM.
There are couple of things here. I think, when we designed NRLM, there's a set of assumptions we made, and which you are kind of establishing the fact that this kind of which assumptions hold good. And I think the way you presented in terms of local markets and the social capital that is kind of linked to what we are doing overall. But the next challenge, I think, what is the next set of assumptions we have to make? I think that's where we have to bring evidence on. And what is those assumptions, design assumptions, that we need to articulate as part of this process also? We should not just leave evidence as taking an assumption, doing impact evaluation, getting to evidence, but what is the next set of things that could be built on what evidence is coming out? It's more than a gut feeling, I think. So what has mostly happened in designing many programs, although not for NRLM, which has been established on various state programs, various pilots and all, is about many ways it's gone through gut feeling process, I think, because somebody thought of idea thinking this could work, and then it worked, then it's curled up. It's been a very civil society driven approach in many cases also. Right, so the challenge for us today is again to think about how do we bring more knowledge from elsewhere, develop a set of assumptions for designing new programs, and bring evidence framework around it to influence again policy and financing coming to that. So I think that's where we should try to do some kind of a exercise further to understand where do we go next from here. We have established this. Then maybe are we okay with only local markets? So there is a readiness to go to other markets and link to markets, or we just say just work on local markets and by layering at this level. I think we also have to think that in India, the geographies we are working in, many geographies has matured into connecting with the markets outside of local markets. So how do we work on those assumptions to link beyond local markets? So is there any evidence coming out of, for instance, if you take markets, if I take Tamil Nadu or other states where the markets are more matured, how they are behaving to this whole process of social capital and the investments that's gone through projects like NRETP or other support. So I think we are at that cusp of thinking. I think that's where we should go towards. And bring projects like there is evidence coming in Latin America, how they have scaled up based on evidence. In China, how they based on household data, how household data based approach of going towards more income approach. So we need to look at, and fortunately in India, NRLM with the uniqueness it has in scale, it will drive the global south towards looking at what are these pathways that we can take it to the world in a way. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Thank you for the insight. So right now we are at 11:30. This was the time we would be breaking out for tea. I just we have another
data बल्कि उसका हम भरपूर प्रयोग भी करें, for which I'm going to request 3I and Dr. Kochar to take a separate session with us later and tell us how can we dive deep into it. Thank you.
So I think that for institutionalizing data and data use, leadership, incentives, systems, processes, and culture, I think would be the pieces that are necessary. One of the biggest, and LocOS is amazing because it really does give you you can really drill down into almost like unit level data in a sense and real time. So I think with digital technology coming in some of these things have become much easier to do. But I would say leadership and culture remain one of the most critical aspects. And maybe one thing that we have to figure out the way of doing that data should not be used for just punishment or penalizing officers or teams. The importance of using data for real-time course correction, I think, has to be emphasized over and over again and maybe even rewarded. So maybe coming up with the right incentive structures to ensure that there is really an honest look at the data and analysis at various levels. And then being able to elevate the right type of message at every level, I think, is really going to be the game changer. We say this very often in public policy that you need to ask the right question at the right time to the right person, and that's really in a sense what we need to figure out. What are those questions? And LocOS then provides you in a sense with the data, but also with so much AI coming in now into use, the analysis and actually positioning it or presenting it in a manner that makes sense to different people is just getting easier and easier. Maybe building those skills in as well and across teams. It should not sit just with the MIS, operator or officer. It really needs to sit across the board with everyone. And then the last bit I'd say, I think it's really important for us to democratize the data use. It shouldn't be sitting only at a leadership level at the center or at the state capital. Really ensuring that even at the CLF level or even at the SCG level, we are able to actually see the data, visualize it, and take action based on that, I think, is going to be important.
I think I totally agree with Sachi on most of the points, but a couple of things. I think if you can have a model CLF policy, why can't you have an evidence policy in NRLM itself to drive your work on evidence, right? That's very important. It is very episodic, right? We do it because it is externally driven, it's donor driven, or it is an ask from somewhere, right? So how do you bring it to the core of, and if you bring with a policy saying we will do our work based on, I know it's a chicken and egg situation many times, how do you manage that is the issue, but that's what you need to really go towards basically. Then I totally agree, the systems, if you have a policy, then come with system processes, capacity with human resource, and then see how you implement it and kind of sequence it. I think that's kind of approach we should take towards institutionalizing it. And I think it should not be at the end of everything we come to a workshop like this. I think the concurrent part of it, I think, is a very important part. If you really want to build a feedback loop, bring that midterm inputs into your policy changes or your implementation related changes. This feedback loop system has to be put in place. It may not be only by workshops and learning events. It can be done digitally. It can be through a DDS. It can be looking at that set, bringing artificial intelligence systems into it. If they can throw out some kind of, periodic signals to the policymaker, decision maker, or people on the ground also. Secondly, because today citizens in India are looking at government performance through evidence also. So I think that's where we need to go towards. How do we establish citizens' credibility, looking at information or the performance or the evidence for establishing credibility of programs like these large-scale programs. And that's how institutionalization should be pursued.
Thank you so much for very, very rich perspectives that have come through. To wrap up, I now request each one of you to share one key takeaway in 30 seconds. That's the only time that we have now. So, Dr. Kochar, again, same order.
The only insight I have is this order is not to my liking. I should be the last person so others can go before me. But great insights from everybody over here, I think, particularly in terms of what we have to do with data and changing that. And I think that is the major thing I take away from this session and that I would like to continue working on.
So, sir, with your permission, मैं अगर question को थोड़ा और enlarge कर दूँ.
Sure.
मेरा क्या key takeaway है इस पूरे NRLM program से, जो 14-15 साल से अपने पूरे strong footprints छोड़ चुका है. सर, मेरी जो शैक्षिक background है, उससे मैंने ये समझा था कि activism really means doing torchlight marches and candlelight processions and protesting against the authority. और फिर करीब 3.5 साल पहले मैं इस कार्यक्रम में आई और एक्टिविज्म का पूरा मतलब बदल गया. एक्टिविज्म इज हैविंग दैट स्ट्रॉन्ग बिलीफ इन योर हार्ट एंड बीइंग ड्रिवन बाय दैट बिलीफ टू गेट इट इम्प्लीमेंटेड ऑन द ग्राउंड. एंड द सक्सेस ऑफ NRLM इज सो मेनी thousands of डेवलपमेंट सेक्टर पार्टनर्स और स्वयं सहायता दीदी जो उस एक्टिविज्म की जो लॉ है उसको अपने अंदर जला के रखती हैं. तो मेरा पूरा सोचने का नज़रिया बदल गया इन कुछ सालों में. एंड विच इज़ वॉट इज़ द पावर ऑफ दिस प्रोग्राम एंड आई होप ये ऐसे ही चलता रहे. थैंक यू सर.
I also want to change the order of how the questions are asked and not have to go after Smriti ma'am. But I'd go back to what I said initially in terms of NRLM. I think of NRLM always as being an iterative program. And I think just sort of thinking about evidence and data as a driver of learning and adaptation, I think is really important. And, you know, to Smriti ma'am's point about thinking about activism and thinking about change, I constantly think myself about the importance of relentless incrementalism, which is a term that someone had shared with me when I started my career many years ago. And I just feel like that's something we have to keep reminding ourselves. But if we have data, if we are able to utilize that data, only then can we actually have relentless incrementalism, because you utilize that to actually make the changes you need to make and keep at it where you know it's actually making a difference.
Thank you. I'm sorry, you're always the last one, but
No, I'm fine. I think there is no shortage of evidence, but I think we need to see the will to use this evidence. Actually, I think if you can establish that, how do you go after that evidence, bring it out, and use it for the purpose you want to use it for, is what we should drive towards.
thank you very much for those sharp closing reflections. Now, we'll take a couple of questions from the audience. Yes, we'll start here and then we'll come to you. Mike?
So thank you, sir. A very good, interesting presentation as well as panel
Please
presentations.
introduce yourself. Yeah.
My question is, how do we connect your research findings with the Panchayat Advancement Index and Revamped Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Abhiyan, so that whatever the findings available will be taken to policy level? So that is my question. Thank you.
How can, yeah. Yeah, can you introduce yourself a little bit? Sir? Introduce yourself.
Sir, I'm Professor Ravichandran from Gandhigram Rural Institute, Tamil Nadu.
Oh, can you repeat?
So I'm working with Gandhigram University as a regional coordinator for Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. We take Panchayat Advancement Index as one of the indicator for training our rural youth, under our students. We are coordinating with the 171 colleges.
Can you please repeat the question again?
Question is very good, interesting findings. And our panel discussion is largely on institutionalizing the findings. So how do we relate our findings with the Panchayat Advancement Index and Revamped Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Abhiyan, so that the meaningful inferences from these things can be part of policy options of the government? Because we are going for 16th Finance Commission shortly. So that will be the major outcome of the things. And another thing is, as Sir Dr. Sami Sundar said, we have enough data generated from Gram Panchayat development plan itself. So, do we consider this data as a part of our research? So this is the question.
So, anyone volunteering? Or maybe we can start in the, change the order now, Mr. Da.
I have to guess some of the questions, to be honest, because it's quite elaborate. First, you asked about taking into the Panchayat Investment Index.
Advancement index. Advancement index.
Yeah, so
That is right now it is being implemented by the ministry for preparation of Gram Panchayat Development Plan and Revamped Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Abhiyan. So that index is taken as an indicator, because whatever the things we are implementing at Gram Panchayat level, it is related with the SDG. As far as India is concerned, Revamped Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Abhiyan is the LSDG. So we have to link all our things with that. Then only it can be taken for policy. I think so, Madam, may I agree.
yeah, I think the way I would look at it, approach it, if I'm part of the process of planning Gram Panchayat level plans, is to look at information that is available with the SHG platforms, right? And also SHG members are part of the Gram Sabha itself, right? So how do you articulate the SHG members' requirement in terms of livelihood support, or their support for credit, or their support for any kind of capacity building or infrastructure related support that could come from support that is coming through the panchayats itself. So I think that process, how it is established, is very important. I think NRLM already has done pilots in various states about preparing this panchayat plans along with SHG federations and SHG members. So I think there's a lot of learning there, but how it has to be further taken forward is what we need to work on in the next phase.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. That's a great question. And I think one that we have all thought about very, very deeply, because it is again at the heart of transforming and making this transformation. I've thought a lot about, I do all this research, we have a whole team that does this research, and then what do we do with the research and how can we make it effective on the ground? You have talked about one way, how do we include it in Gram Panchayat plans, village poverty plans, etc. Again, we should be realistic about the constraints that we face. Okay, so we can generate data, but to make that data useful, the data has to be tailored to the context. So if I am preparing a Gram Panchayat plan for Bihar, or for Madhya Pradesh, or for Punjab, those should be three completely different kinds of plans. The indicators I'm putting on should be changing from one to the other, again, as the context changes. We are far from that. We don't have that. And you will see that reflected even in things like the IFC that I'll be talking about later, the way that planning is done. Even though it is supposed to be decentralized, it's very centralized, reflecting capacity in one way. So that's one thing that I think we need to move towards. But the second part, which I don't think I'm extending your question a little bit. The second part is things we've talked about now. We have results, so we have, not just our studies, but so many studies. How do we disseminate that at the ground so that it's useful to Gram Panchayats also, leave alone the state governments, etc. And that is a massive exercise in dissemination, which I think researchers should be criticized for, because they don't do enough of that and they don't do it effectively. Okay, so I'm going back to, this is something I've thought about or care about a lot. And if I look at nutrition, okay, and I spent a lot of time actually in Madhya Pradesh in a project on nutrition. Madhya Pradesh, as you know, and this is going back 5 years or 10 years, malnutrition is extreme compared to other places in India. This is actually a project in Madhya Pradesh and Andhra Pradesh where, again, malnutrition is extreme. But when I stood in a village and I tried to have a conversation on malnutrition, there are very few women there who accepted the fact that their children were malnourished. So that itself was this failure, that we are not communicating. Malnourished doesn't mean skin and bones. It's going on beyond that you can be malnourished. And the methods we are using to disseminate that, to pass on that information, those methods need to change and become much more effective, given that we have so many more tools in our hand.